but I'm gonna, miss recording. And last time, Kelly, because you had told me that you're gonna be not there, I remember to record it, but today I did not. I'm sorry about that. Okay. So we have the Tagalog cases. So we have the base morphemes and then the infixed morphemes. And as you can see, the infixation is the past tense morpheme in Tagalog. Here is another example of infixation. This is Arabic. And as you can see, I have bolded the sounds that I want you to be concentrating on, right? So you can see you have a k, a t, and a b, right? And you can have different vowels inserted into this k, t, b, and have kataba, which is wrote, kutub, which is has been written, and aktub, which is am writing, right? So you have the same three sounds, k, t, b, with different vowels inserted in different positions to get different meaning, right? This is again a different example of infixation, a different kind of infixation system, not exactly the same as Tagalog, but there's a word for this one. Does anybody know what is this kind of morphology called? This is called as a templatic morphology. Arabic and other Hebrew and those kind of Middle Eastern languages are very well known for showing this kind of templatic morphology. So templatic morphology is basically when you have 2 or 3 consonants. So in this case, you have the katab, that's what we call it, katab, KTB, and then you add different concatenations, right? We call these as concatenations, which is different permutation and combinations of sounds, basically concatenations, to get different words. Now I have the same word in different meanings over here. So you have kataba, you have kutub and aktub. Now I can create another word with the same kataba, kitab. Kitab means book. And this is easier for me to do because Hindi Urdu is also derived from Arabic, and we have the same word in Hindi Urdu. That's why I know it. I don't know Arabic, if you're wondering. But so again, you can see the same kataba that I have used with different vowel sounds to create a new word. And in this case, this word is now a noun. It means book. Very cool, right? If you ask me, I love the way Arabic does its morphology. This is something that you can definitely steal for your constructed language, right? And play around with it. If that's something that you're interested in doing, I really like the way that Arabic actually does this. So, okay, let's move on. So I'm gonna break you out into breakout rooms. Let's go back to English. Let's start with English and then go into other languages today. I want you all to identify the bound morpheme. So bound morpheme is the morpheme that does not stand free, right? And the root of the word, okay? In each of these sentences, I'm gonna pair you up to do this exercise. So if you wanna take a screenshot, please do that. Breakout rooms. Okay.
And then the bound part of the morpheme is meant. And then
I think sweet is completely standalone.
Yeah, I don't know what would be the Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's just completely standalone, its own root.
I mean, that one's even hard to put into like, I don't know how many syllables that is. Sweet. Is it just one?
I think it's just one.
It looks like so many letters, but yeah, it just sounds weird, but I can't see any way to break that up.
Yeah, I think that's just sweet. And then of
No.
course fastest.
Mhm.
That one's pretty easy. That one's just fast and est.
Tremendous obey.
Treat, root, miss, bound, mature, root, pre, bound.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
I agree 100%.
Awesome.
And if we were doing sign language, I remember some of the bound. I remember person as a bound morpheme.
Yeah, the agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess it's kind of debatable if that is actually a suffix or if it's like compound words. Like, is teacher, is it teacher or is it teach person? Like, because it's literally the word person, but is it different from the actual word person or is it the same?
Well, it's technically the same. This is person. And so when you put teach and person together, that is like a compound word pretty much.
But then when you say student, I see sometimes,
Student,
yeah, sometimes I see ASL speakers drop the left hand.
Yeah, it's just student.
And in that case, it feels like a suffix because it's not the same as change or teach
Yeah.
person.
Right.
The meaning with the teacher, I think the way that it is interpreted is a person who is teaching. So it's
Yeah.
more like a relative clause kind of, you see what I'm saying? Not a compound. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting papers looking at this, Landon, if you're interested in, reading more on the ASL linguistic side of things.
Oh,
so just shoot me an email and I can send you interesting
a-
literature on that.
I have a book.
Yeah. Or
Borrow
that.
my book.
Yeah, ASL is. It's kind of sad that ASL is like the
Oh,
only.
cool. Yeah.
ASL is the only like very accessible signs language for linguistic purposes.
Yeah.
My visual anthropology professor, Dr. Kreinot, has pointed me in the direction of some research on Australian sign languages, which are totally different.
Different, yes. I mean, there are about 200 sign languages in the world, so yeah. It's just like the diversity of languages, right? I mean, why would you expect one sign language to be the same as another? I mean, they're not dialects; they're individual languages with, individual grammar and structure. Yeah.
And they're all influenced by different cultures. So
yeah,
correct.
Which is why I think I remember that in Japanese sign language and Chinese sign language, eat does not is not like that. It is like involving chopsticks. So it's something like that.
It because of the culture, it looks different. Yeah.
Okay,
But
I
the
will leave
thing
you
was-
to your exercise. I'm gonna join another breakout room. Okay.
Okay.
The thing about
I am here to ask if you have any questions for me. I'm assuming you're okay.
I'm okay, yeah.
Okay. Erin, you're good too?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. I'm here to ask if you have any questions for me.
I do have one with like the word prettier. So could pretty be the root word, or does it have to like be specifically spelled in prettier to be a root word?
No, so spelling can change when affixation or suffixation can happen. So when you do the bound morpheme, you have to break it down into the bound morpheme with the actual spelling of it.
Okay.
Yeah. So prettier is Pretty, but after suffixation, it changes to Prettier because of the ER suffixation. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other one we were talking about was triumph. We got that triumph would be the root, but the bound morpheme would just be the suffix, right? The ed, because like
Correct.
try is a part of the word.
Correct.
Okay. Cool. Then I think I understand.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
I had a question.
Yeah, Nael.
Okay. So when you were talking about suppletion, you were talking about like the difference between like bought and then how we normally add ed as a suffix to mean the past tense. Is that what that meant? Okay, so my question was on prettier, is more or the ER the irregular? Like if we were to say he is more agile or he is the fastest, which one is the irregular part? Or are they both?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So what Nael is asking is about two different ways of forming comparative morphemes in English. So where is my annotation? Oh, there it is. So comparative morpheme, right? So you have over here in prettier, you have the ER. So you have pretty plus ER giving you prettier. But you also have another way of doing comparison in English. So you can say beautiful is more beautiful, right? And not beautifuler, right? You can really take beautiful and add ER to it to make beautifuler, but you can take pretty and combine ER to it. So I wouldn't call one way or another irregular and regular in this case, Nael. These are actually two different ways of doing comparison. So one is called a synthetic comparison marker, and the other one is called, there's a different name for it, more like a qualitative comparative marker when you use the more actually. So there are actually two different ways of combining it. Now, the more interesting question would be, why can you not do beautiful plus ER and make beautifuler, right? That is, I think, the more interesting question to ask in this point, because what is it about pretty that you can take pretty and combine ER? I mean, you can still say more pretty. I mean, nobody does it because you have prettier. So it's kind of like a redundant, way of saying things, but you cannot say beautifuler, right? That's not okay, right? That's ungrammatical in English. So I think, the interesting question to ask in this case is, why are there two different comparative morphemes in English? Why can you use ER with some of them? And why do you always have to use more with some of them, right? I wouldn't call this irregular versus regular. So does that answer your
So I have
question?
another question. And so like in triumphed, is the try used on that? Would that be irregular? Because we normally use that as 3, right? But I don't know what an umph is.
Right. So, you know, when you start out with morphology, it's really easy to start seeing morphemes everywhere and be like, oh, I have to break this word up into like multiple pieces. So in Triumph, it Triumph is one morpheme, right? Don't try to break that down into try and because just like you said, you're not going to be able to do that because like what is try and what is in like Triumph, right? I mean, Triumph is one morpheme, even though it looks like, you know, you could break that down into two different morphemes. So Triumph is one morpheme, and then the ed is the regular past tense triumphed, right? Ed. Does that answer your question, Nayel?
I guess my question was the prefix. Is that regular? How, because we usually use it as 3, right? Like triathlon, triangle, tricycle. So in that case, since we normally use it as a prefix as 3, like meaning 3 things, does that mean this use of it and this is like irregular for English?
Oh, I see what you're saying. You know, I mean, sure, you can call it an irregular usage in that sense of it, but that's not the same as an irregular or suppletive morphology, if you mean what I'm saying. So suppletion is a morphological process, right? Versus the use of try with the meaning 3 in this word is an accident. It's accidental. That's how I would describe it. Morphologically, this is an accident versus when you are using an irregular morphology for like plural or a past tense, it's actually a conscious decision made by the language, if languages have conscience. You see what I'm saying? Or by the users of the language, by the speakers of the language, because the speakers definitely have conscience. So the try in Triumph is an accident and not an irregular suppletion. Yeah. Landon, think you want to add to that?
I hadn't noticed like the try and triumph like might be related to the word 3 at all until Niall pointed it out. So I looked it up, and it turns out it is the word triumph.
Oh.
Yeah, the word triumph comes from Greek thriambos, which means a specific type of hymn to the god of wine, Dionysus, and the is the same ambos in like an iamb, like if you know poetry.
Oh, okay. Right.
And
iambic poetry. Me too.
Yeah, and the try, the thry, 3 comes from the Greek word for fig leaf, because fig leaves have three-pronged leaves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good observation, Niall. I know, but you're also now in, history of English. That's your second assignment in history of English. We are going to find all this, roots of words. So with English, it's a lot easier to see because it's borrowed from a lot of these different Greek and Roman and, yeah.
I guess the interesting part is that it was once these 2 easily distinct parts, but now it's one word when it got borrowed in English.
Exactly. Yeah. Great. Any other questions on that before we move on?
Okay, I guess I have one more question. So since we are speaking about English, but I know a lot of times we break words up into Latin, like this is how we know what this, prefix means or whatever. So when we're looking at our morphemes in our smallest unit of meaning, are we looking at it from that perspective, I guess? Does that make sense? Or are we looking at it from, this is my intuitive knowledge of English. We don't have an in this word. I'm not going to look it up to see, if it's Greek or not. Is that what we're talking about? Or
exactly. That would be the way that you did it would be how I would ask you to do it in the history of English language, which Landon is taking with me this semester. So because it makes sense to do that in the history of English context, because we are talking about what are the languages that English is borrowed from, and is this a Latin suffix? Did this happen because English borrowed a lot from Greek and Italian and Roman and all these other languages? So the question of what is English is a bigger question that I don't want to answer in linguistics 151 because we cannot answer that question 151. But here what we are just doing is we are taking things verbatim without the history behind the word, right? So definitely, you know, a lot of these morphemes must have come from, you know, Greek or Latin or any of the other languages that English borrowed from. But, you know, I mean, I have this qualm about the term borrowing. Borrowing means that you give it back, but English never gave it back, right? So really the word is stealing at this point, right? All the words that English stole from these other languages, but kind of made it its own, right? So English took these words and said, this is what I'm going to do with it. Now it's an English word, right? That's all we care about in 151, Nigel. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's get into the answer. So I guess, you know, with triumph, we kind of know what to do with it, the bound morpheme and the root of the word. The root of the word is triumph and the bound morpheme is ed, right? So let's go on to the second one. What about delight? What's the bound morpheme and the root of the word? Or is there a bound morpheme?
So my first instinct is to say that D is the bound morpheme and then light is the root word. But then as I think about it, I don't know, delight in itself is one word with a meaning very separate from the word light.
Right. Yeah.
So does that still mean we've got a root and a bound morpheme?
No. So let's change the word up a little bit. So how about I say delighted? Now, do you see a bound morpheme and a root of the word? Yeah. When you say delighted, you know that, okay, there's delight and then there's ed, and there's a clear meaning with, you know, what's delight and what's delighted. But when you have delight, you're tempted to break it down into D and light just because you have a prefix D and another word light, but it's not. It's just a single morpheme in this case.
Is it like, I thought of it as the D being a prefix of like deriving from, or like of like if I say I'm, I don't know, decompressing, I'm like deriving something from like compressing, like, you know, something. So that's what I thought it meant, is like deriving something from light, and, you know, light being, you know, you know, a good thing. That's what I thought delight meant.
Yeah. So when you have decompress or you know, in decompress, D is definitely a prefix and compress is definitely the bound morpheme or the root of the word, right? But not in delight, right? So in delight, it's just because the meaning is so different from the meaning of its component parts that you don't want to break it down into the bound morpheme and the root of the word. It's just a monomorphemic word, delight. Okay. What about payment? Is that a complex word or a simple word, or?
So we figured it was pay was the root of the word, and then meant was the suffix, so the part that bound the morpheme.
Yep, that's right. Pay is the root of the word and meant is the bound morpheme. Good. Sweet. That's, I think, pretty straightforward. That's a root of the word. It's a single word, right? One word. Fastest. What's the root of the word?
That one would be fast, and then the bound morpheme is the EST.
Yep. Fast is the root of the word, and EST is the superlative morpheme, the superlative marker in English. So you have fast, faster, fastest, right? Superlative. Disobey, very similar to payment, right? So you have dis and obey. Obey is the root of the word, and dis is the bound morpheme, right? Prettier, I think we talked about prettier. So pretty is the root of the word, and ER is the bound morpheme, prettier, as a comparative form. Mistreat, again, very similar to payment and disobey. Treat is the root of the word and miss is the prefix. And the same thing with premature. Mature is the root of the word, and the bound morpheme is premature, right? Any questions on that? Okay. Let's move on. So now that we have an understanding of how different words can be composed with different morphemes, let's actually look at a morphological rule. And let's actually look at the suffix ER, because we've been talking about the suffix ER quite a bit in this class. So the first observation of ER is that you can attach ER to verbs. So you can have words like player, baker, dancer, right? You can take a verb to play, to bake, to dance, and attach the ER to it to get, another word, which is a noun. Suffix ER cannot attach to other kinds of words, like it cannot attach to nouns. So you cannot say piano, pianoer, right? Meaning somebody who plays the piano. Or you cannot say book, booker, right? Meaning somebody who reads the book. And it cannot also attach to adjectives. So you can say beautiful and beautifuler, as we just discussed in the previous slide. So the first generalization that you can come about of the suffix ER is that ER can only attach to verbs like player and baker and dancer. But the second observation is something that I just mentioned, like when you attach ER to a verb, the word that you're getting is a noun, right? And not another verb. So you have block, blocker is the one who blocks, it's a noun. Play, player, one who plays, right? So blocker and player are both nouns of English and not verbs of English. So the generalization that you can kind of make from this is that you take ER, you take a suffix ER, take a verb, and attach ER to the verb to create a noun. So we can informally state this as a rule of English. A noun can be created by affixing ER to the end of a word, right? So here is how you would do that in a rule formation or a formal notation for morphological rules. So you have N is a noun right here. There, N, right? Noun. We is a verb, and then ER is a suffixation. So you have a noun, and then the arrow is can be created from. So a noun can be created from a verb combined with an ER, right? You take a verb, to play, to dance, to bake, attach ER to it, player, baker, dancer, you get a noun, right? So you can also call this as internal structure of words in English. So you can say that the morphological structure of player, you can draw a tree structure for this. You can have play, which is a verb, and then you can combine that with ER, right? So take a verb, combine that with ER to create a noun. So the way of diagramming this, it's just the same thing that you kind of previously saw in a noun formation, like in a morphological rule formation. But the good thing about putting it in a tree diagram is the fact that what you are seeing is that words have hierarchical structure within them. And this can also then translate to sentences. Sentences also have hierarchical structure within them. We will see that when we get into syntax a little later. But really, when you have internal structure, you can always, draw that in a tree diagram or a tree structure format. So to actually then see this kind of internal structure and this internal kind of morphological rules, let's actually do an exercise. This is a language spoken in Micronesia. This language is called as Morphologies. And I've given you some meaning things here. So when you see the abbreviation INCL, it means inclusive. EXCL is exclusive. PL is plural, and SG is singular. Okay, so let's look at the data. So this is the data in Morphologies. So as you can see, you have the INCL, which is inclusive, and EXCL is exclusive, and SG is singular, and PL is plural. And then you have the word in Morphologies as well as the meaning side by side, right? So again, if you want to take, if you want to screenshot this, I can move on to the next slide with the questions. Okay, so your task is to identify the morpheme corresponding to each of the following. And again, if you want to take a screenshot, I'm gonna put you guys into breakout rooms. And then, so if you want to take a screenshot, does anybody want a screenshot of the previous slide?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So let me break you out in the breakout rooms.